Hi, everybody. It's John Stinson from the Easton Board of Education.
This is Chris Parkin from the Reading Board of Education.
And Todd Johnston from Region 9 Board of Education.
And I'm Rodell Harrison, Superintendent of ER9, and this is Between Three Chairs.
Hi, Dr. Harrison. We've now had our first COVID cases at Reading Elementary School this week. Can you give the community an update on the response from the schools and what we should be looking forward to in the future with respect to the positive cases?
Sure, that's a really great question. As we're thinking about responding and communicating information, there's two things that I'm always thinking about. The first is that we want to communicate quickly, but we really want to communicate accurately. And so in doing that, when we learned initially that we had 2 cases in our community, we had a great conversation with the principal and assistant principal at RES, with our tri-district nurse coordinator, and then also with the Department of Health, with our local health officials, to really give us an understanding of the scope of the concern, and then really to start doing the work of contact tracing. Of course, everyone knows that we had 2 cases at Reading Elementary, and then later that day we had a case at Joe Barlow High School, and you see that the responses were different. It's one of the things that we've said a number of times, that each case is unique, and the contact tracing and the potential impact for students and staff is really on a case-by-case basis. So that's where it's really nice to have that partnership in decision-making with our local health officials.
And what's the partnership like between the schools and the Park and Rec department? Because I understand there was also an issue with the extended day program at RES this week.
Sure, and so that's a challenging one, right? Because the Park and Rec program is a Park and Rec program, but it's in our building. And so there was really nice communication between the director of that program and our principal to keep us posted on what was happening. But all of that communication would then come from Park and Rec. And what we saw from our parents reached out and shared with our teachers or with our administrators. My child has been asked to quarantine for the next 2 weeks. What do I need to do in order to access that learning online? And we have a couple of places, particularly across our elementary schools, where teachers may not be streaming every day because they don't have now that we're all in. And so one of the things that we ask is that if there is a situation where a student has to quarantine, and we were not expecting that, so different than when we're having to quarantine students, to just make sure that the parent is flexible and gives us some time in order to pull materials together and prepare.
So, Dr. Harrison, when we think about the decision to quarantine, a class, a grade, or to sort of go to distance for a school, I think there's a fair amount. There's this very delicate sort of balance that we're all holding our breath, right? And I think while we've seen numbers spike in Easton, we have not yet seen cases in the schools, and I think people are just fingers crossed, toes crossed. Can we please not close the schools? How do we make sure that when we think about the feedback, whether it's from board members or the public or the sense let's keep these schools open, how do we make sure that that voice is heard in the conversation? What's that decision point really sort of based on?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, the one thing I keep reminding myself is that even though our administrators and our teachers are having to be contact tracers and feeling like epidemiologists, and, we're monitoring changes that come from CDC. There was a slight change earlier this week around what the definition of close contact. And so we are staying on top of all of those things, but reminding ourselves that we are in the business of teaching and learning. And so the ideal situation is to make sure that there's as little disruption to learning for our students as possible. That said, every decision is based on the health and safety of our students and our staff. And so this is where we have very close connections with our health directors from both towns, with our medical advisor, and we're having those conversations and getting that feedback from them. What you won't see happen is for us to sort of take a poll and say, here's what the data looks like. What do you all think? Should we stay open or closed? And, you know, it was really clear from the governor and from the Commissioner of Education that that is part of the responsibility, or that is the responsibility of the superintendent, but not making that decision in isolation, but really considering the health professionals and then the looking at our health data locally over a 14-day period.
Thanks. That's very helpful.
And Dr. Harrison, we know we've got a density problem with the number of students coming all in at the high school. How and when will you make that decision to go all in at the high school?
We had a great discussion about this at the Region 9 board meeting last week or earlier this week.
Earlier than
this week, thank you. And you know, we talked about what are some of the challenges, what are some of the things that we would need to have in place in order to offset the concerns related to density in the building. We looked at natural breaks in the school year, so you know, there'd have to be some scheduling changes and some room changes. And then also some just some work in the building that we talked about with administration there. We're always looking at that. I want to look at ways to, are there ways that we could bring more students in the building? But ultimately, we heard from our medical professionals that this is not a good time to increase density at the high school. We're seeing some of those cases rise around us. We're always looking at that information, but what I could say to our families, don't expect a change related to whether or not high school students are going in really for the next couple of months, because we want to be consistent and really monitor what that data looks like.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.